Chapter 13 Marooned. No sound came from the cottage. The girls stood on the doorstep for a few moments and listened. "I'm sure there's nobody in," whispered Katie. "I'm trembling," Joanne murmured. Katie very carefully peeped through one of the leaded front windows. "See anything?" hissed Joanne. "No, it's a bit of a mess, though. We may as well knock at the door. Nothing much can happen to us in broad daylight." Nobody answered. What to do now? It seemed a bit of an anticlimax. "Let's go round the back," suggested Katie. The back of the cottage was just as pleasant as the front, with flowers in bloom and herb and vegetable garden. A window was open. "People forget to shut windows in this weather like this," said Joanne. "It's a very silly thing to do." "But lucky for us," answered Katie. "We can climb through." "Oh no, Katie!" But Katie was already halfway through the quaint little window, and Joanne, after a few more unheeded protests, followed. They found themselves in the kitchen. "It's a disgrace to allow such a nice kitchen to get into such a mess," said Katie. "Yes," agreed Joanne, viewing the pile of dirty pots and pans. "I thought our kitchen at home got into a state, but it never looked as bad as this." The girls made their way through the tiny hall into the sitting room. It was a very picturesque, with a period fireplace and old beams, but it was too cluttered with plates of half-eaten food and dirty teacups. "It's disgusting!" exclaimed Joanne. "Don't you see why?" cried Katie. "Someone has been held a prisoner here." She held up a rope. "Bound with this. And see these blankets and a pillow on the sofa and the food?" "Barry?" murmured Joanne. "Looks like it." As they surveyed the sorry scene, both girls were startled to hear a car stop outside. Joanne gasped, "Someone's here!" and instinctively they ducked down behind a chair. There was a loud knock at the door. Katie crept to the window and managed to peep from behind the curtain. "It's all right, Joanne," she shouted. "It's Janet." Both girls laughed with relief as Janet explained. "This morning after you left, I started thinking, and I remembered that Barry had a big house down here." "That's right, Stockfield Hall," said Katie. "He owns this cottage, too." "I didn't know about the cottage, but I felt there must be a connection," Janet went on. "Well, I decided to put off my business for today and come down to help. Sorry, I gave you a fright." "It's great to see you, Janet," said Joanne. "Thanks for coming." "It looks like Barry's been kept here," said Katie. I see what you mean. We're obviously dealing with vicious types." Joanne shivered as Janet continued. "Let's decide what we should do now." All three thought for a time and came to the conclusion, as the cottage was deserted, Barry must be at Stockfield Hall. "We can go there in my car," said Janet. "Do you know the way?" "Yes, Sam told us," said Katie. "Good. Now, when we get there, we must be very careful. We don't know who or what we'll find." "Susie will probably be there," said Joanne. "She was seen here at the cottage this morning by the lady from the post office. She knows us and she doesn't like us." "The others will be there today, too," added Katie. "Remember the message I heard when I was working on the switchboard? That's partly why I was so glad we could come here today." "I know," cried Janet. "You two can hide somewhere, perhaps in the grounds, and I can go to the hall quite openly. I won't be suspected. I'm writing about Barry, after all. They'll just think I'm my usual nosy self. I'll find out what I can, then report back to you." The girls thought this was an excellent idea. What a staunch ally Janet was turning out to be. After they all left the cottage, Joanne exclaimed, "There's some post behind the door." Janet picked up a couple of letters and what looked like a note. "For Barry," she said. "With any luck, I'll be able to give them to him at Stockfield Hall." The fine old Elizabethan building soon came into view, the sunlight dancing on its numerous windows. "There's the lake! Oh, it's got an island in the middle." Joanne was enthralled. "I wish we could row out to it." "Not quite what we came here for," reprimanded Katie. "Hang on," said Janet, stopping the car. "It might be a good idea. The island would be a safer place for you to hide than the grounds, which are probably patrolled. I'll row you out in that little boat over there, and I'll row back for you later." Katie wasn't too keen on this. She wanted to be closer to the hall in case Janet needed help. "And I'll feel better if we had a boat with us so we could leave if we had to." "Stay in the car," said Janet. "I'll look round for one." After a few minutes she returned. there were no more boats. "I can see one," said Joanne, pointing. "I looked at that one. It's damaged." In due course, the girls were deposited on the island with the firm promise that Janet would return as soon as possible. "Please take care," pleaded Joan as she waved Janet off. As she stepped back from the water's edge, she felt her feet crunch into paper. Janet had dropped one of the letters and the note she had picked up at the cottage. Joan yelled, but Janet was already out of earshot. "Let's see," said Katie. She took the items from Joan and studied them. As she did so, her face clouded. "What's wrong?" asked Joan. "We have been tricked," said Katie grimly, "and now we're trapped." "What?" Joan almost screamed. "Read this." Katie handed over the note. It read, "Everyone to be at the hall today, and watch out for 2 nosy Parkers." It was signed by somebody called Mac. "I don't understand," whimpered Joan. "Mac, isn't he the man you heard on the phone? He must have left the note at the cottage and Janet simply picked it up with the others. It's awful writing, isn't it? The same as that on the note you picked up with the tea tray." "Yes, it's the same writing, but this Mac isn't the one I heard on the phone. This Mac is Janet Macklin." "That's preposterous." "It's true, Joe. I'm so angry. If only I'd followed my intuition. I felt uneasy about telling her everything. How could we have been so stupid? I could kick myself." "But Katie, how'd you know it's Janet's writing?" "Because I noticed it on those files and folders she had lying around in her room. The writing seemed familiar, but it didn't connect with the tea tray note. I suppose that subconsciously I wanted to trust her. But now I've seen this note, I know for sure. She must have called at the cottage before us and left the note for the others, not realizing that we'd actually enter. Then she went to the hall, warned the rest, and returned to the cottage to look for us." "So it was Janet, not Susie, the old lady saw?" "Probably. The others will be at the hall." "What about Mac?" asked Joan. "Are there 2 Macs?" "It seems so." Katie managed a weak smile. The girls examined their island prison. "After all, we must keep calm," said Katie. "Let's consider the possibilities. No waving or shouting. The lake is in the Stockfield Hall grounds. We must leave without attracting attention. We couldn't swim that far, at least I couldn't. You're a good swimmer, though." "I know, but I couldn't either, Katie. It's a hot day, but water like this is very cold. Lots of people get into difficulties swimming in cold inland water in very hot weather." I could try, though, but what if I got a cramp?" "You couldn't help. You're not a strong swimmer. We might both drown." "You're right," said Katie, "but we must do something before they come for us. Perhaps we could make a raft. There's plenty of wood." The pair began a frantic search. Suddenly Joan yelled with glee. "I've found a boat!" "Great!" declared Katie, inspecting the find. "It's in a bad state, though. It must have been here for years." "Will it be safe?" asked Joan anxiously. "It's all damaged on one side." "It'll do. We'll have to bail out if it leaks." "What with?" I know. With a lemonade bottle and cups. It should get us most of the way to the bank, then we can swim a short way if we have to. There's 1 oar in the boat. Not much good, but it'll do. Look around for the other one or a large piece of wood." A suitable piece of wood was soon found, and all was ready. "Here goes," cried Katie, as the ancient craft bounced into the shimmering water. All went well at first, although the boat did let in water. "Nearly there," cried Katie, leaning over to reach a plastic cup that had floated to the other end of the bottom of the boat. As she did so, her foot slipped on the damaged side. Katie was in the water and she was panicking. "Joan! Joan, help!" Joan leaned forward over the side. "Keep calm, Katie," she pleaded. Katie grabbed hold of her. The boat tilted and then Joan too was in the water. She began to swim. Katie was still struggling desperately and trying to reach her friend. "Just keep calm, Katie," cried Joan. "You'll be fine. I'll help you." Katie began to overcome the panic she had suffered by falling from the boat, and though still very distressed, she began to swim. With Joan's help and encouragement, the 2 girls reached the bank. Katie lay breathless for several minutes before gasping, "Thanks, Joe. You saved my life." Joan blushed. "I didn't. You saved yourself." "You saved me and I'll never forget it." "Oh, shut up. Are you cold?" "A little, but the sun will dry our clothes in no time." The 2 girls sat on the secluded lakeside, drying in the sun, for quite some time. Eventually, they decided to move towards the hall. "Let's try to make our way to the back," said Katie. "Then we shouldn't be spotted." As they carefully crept through the wooded grounds, the girls noticed Johnny Fish's van and several cars parked at the front of the hall. As they had hoped, all was quiet at the back of the huge house. "Kneel down as you pass the windows," whispered Katie. They tried a door marked "Tradesman's Entrance." "Locked," Katie sighed. "It'll have to be a window. This one's open." She peeped through. "Can't see anybody. Here we go." End of chapter 13.